You're standing on a city wall at dawn, watching the horizon. There's no dust cloud yet, no thunder of hooves. It's just silence, the kind that makes your chest tighten. Then you see them, dark shapes moving like a single organism across the plain. And you know, deep in your bones, that when they arrive, the war won't end with surrender. It will begin with it. Before we go deeper, I'm curious, where in the world are you watching this from? It's remarkable how a story from 8 centuries ago still finds us, no matter the distance. What I'm about to share isn't a tale of battles won or empires claimed. It's the story of a weapon so devastatingly effective that its consequences are still measurable today in our DNA. In the silence where languages used to exist, in the empty deserts where cities of 500,000 people once stood. The Mongol Empire conquered more territory than any force in history, but their true genius wasn't in tactics or cavalry or siege engines. It was in understanding that you don't need to kill everyone to destroy a civilization. You just need to break it in the right places. And the most efficient place to break a culture, it's women. Between 1206 and 1368, the Mongols subjugated kingdoms with populations 50 times their own. They turned cities that had flourished for millennia into footnotes that most people today have never heard of. They created what geneticists now call a genetic bottleneck, a moment when one lineage spread so rapidly across Asia that roughly 16 million men alive today carry markers tracing back to that era. This isn't natural population growth. This is the signature of something deliberate, systematic, and executed with chilling precision. The Mongols built a machine, and at its center, serving as both fuel and target, were women whose names history never recorded. In 1219, before the invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire, Genghis Khan sent messengers ahead with an offer, not a threatened offer. Whoever submits shall be spared, they announced in city after city. But those who resist, they shall be destroyed with their wives, children, and dependents. Descendants will be put to the sword. Notice the language. Wives and children get their own clause. That's not accidental prose. That's advertised policy. The Mongols wanted you to know exactly what resistance would cost, and critically, they wanted you to know that death would be the merciful part. This was terror as technology. Fear, they understood, travels faster than horses. Here's the mathematics of it. You have 50,000 soldiers. Ahead lie 12 fortified cities, each capable of bleeding your army for months. Or you make an example of one city so horrific that the other 11 open their gates without a fight. You spend your brutality like currency, and it purchases the surrender of a dozen kingdoms. It's monstrous. It's evil. And it's mathematically brilliant. But they didn't choose targets randomly. They selected cities known for culture, learning, religious significance. Places like Nish are famous across the Islamic world for poetry and mathematics. Or Merv, one of the largest cities on earth, home to libraries and scholars and centuries of accumulated knowledge. Why these cities? Because the destruction had to hurt symbolically. When you erase one of humanity's great centers of civilization, every other city thinks, if it happened to them, what chance do we have? When Nishapur fell in 1221, after a Mongol prince was killed in the siege, the response was calculated. Every single person was to be killed. Every head was to be piled in separate pyramids, one for women, one for women, one for children. The daughter of Genghis Khan's son-in-law personally oversaw the execution of the women and children. She wanted to ensure thoroughness. When archaeologists excavated the site centuries later, they found a layer of ash several feet deep, covering artifacts from what had been one of history's greatest cities. But here's what most accounts won't tell you. The killing was the efficient part. The killing was mercy. For the women who were spared, their nightmare was just beginning. Imagine you're a Persian noblewoman in 1221. You're 23 years old. You've been educated. You read poetry in 3 languages. You study astronomy. Your marriage has been carefully arranged to a prominent merchant's son. Then the Mongols come. Your husband dies defending the inner wall. Your father is executed in the central square. Your brothers are in those pyramids outside the city. You are pulled from your home and examined like a horse at auction. A Mongol officer claims you. You don't speak his language. He doesn't ask your name. 9 months later, you give birth to his child's son. He takes the baby from you. The child will be raised in a gyre, a felt tent on the steppe. He will learn to ride before he can walk. He will worship Tengri, the sky god. He will never know your poetry. He will never pray in your language. He will never even know what city his mother came from. That is the first act of erasure. You continue to breathe, but everything you were, your lineage, your culture, your future, is already dead. This wasn't random cruelty. This was systematic genetic conquest. When you force captive women to bear your children, you're not just conquering the present, you're colonizing the future. Those children are raised Mongol. Their mother's stories become forbidden memories. Within a single generation, an entire bloodline is reprogrammed. It's annihilation without ruins. Genocide without graves. In 2003, geneticists identified a Y chromosomal lineage originating in Mongolia approximately 1,000 years ago. The estimate, 16 million men alive today carry this genetic signature. That's roughly 0.5% of all men on Earth sharing a single male ancestor from the Mongol imperial period. One genetic lineage spreading across Asia in just a few generations. This isn't the natural drift of populations. This is the signature of conquest written into our very cells. But the Mongols understood something that made this system even more devastating. You can't just erase a people's future. You have to destroy their present. You have to break their spirits so completely they lose the will to resist. That's where the second act comes in. And it was performed in public, on purpose, as theater. February 13, 1258. Baghdad falls. This isn't just any city. This is the seat of the Abbasid Caliphate, the center of Islamic civilization for 5 centuries. Home to the House of Wisdom, where scholars had preserved Greek philosophy, advanced mathematics, and mapped the stars. The Mongols under Hulagu Khan breached the walls. Estimates of the dead range from 200,000 to 1 million. The Tigris River reportedly runs black with ink from destroyed books, then red with blood. But here's where the true genius of Mongol psychological warfare reveals itself. The women of the Caliph's palace, women who had never been seen by public eyes, who lived their entire lives in seclusion, who were considered almost sacred, these women are dragged into the streets. Their veils are torn away, their clothing is stripped, and they are paraded through the markets. These are the mothers, wives, and daughters of the man who claimed spiritual authority over hundreds of millions of Muslims. To see them exposed, humiliated, degraded isn't just an assault on those individual women. It's a message carved into the collective psyche. Your leaders cannot protect even those closest to them. Your God did not intervene. Your civilization is already dead. You're just still breathing. The women are then sold in slave markets, some for as little as a single silver coin. The price isn't about economics, it's about contempt. For the men who survive, this is a wound that never heals. You didn't just lose the war, you lost your identity as a protector. Your honor, the foundation of your social structure, has been publicly shattered. And here's what makes this calculated rather than chaotic. The Mongols didn't do this everywhere. Cities that surrendered early were often spared. The humiliation was advertised ahead of the army. Surrender and you keep your dignity. Resist and we'll make sure your grandchildren feel ashamed to speak your name. This is terror as technology, refined through trial and error across decades of conquest. But we're only beginning to understand the depth of this system. There's a siege tactic the Mongols employed that sounds too horrific to be true, except that it's documented in Persian, Chinese, and Russian sources. The tactic was called hashar, translating roughly to human cattle or living boards. The Mongols would conquer Scythia, then keep captives alive, not out of mercy. For logistics. When besieging City B, these captives, women with infants, elderly people, children, would be driven forward at sword point to ward the walls. As the Mongol army assembled siege equipment behind this human barrier, the defenders faced an impossible choice: shoot and kill your own people, or hold fire and watch the Mongols advance protected. Either choice destroyed morale. This tactic achieved multiple objectives: physical protection for Mongol soldiers, psychological warfare that gave defenders no winning option, and practical efficiency. The bodies of those who fell were piled into moats, literally used as fill to create ramps for siege towers. If you were a captive woman, your final purpose might be to fall into a moat and have your corpse used as a bridge so the men who enslaved you could walk over your body to enslave the next city. You weren't a person. You were construction material, an expendable resource measured in bodies. The Persian historian Juvain recorded multiple instances of this. The secret history of the Mongols references it obliquely. Chinese chronicles describe the same practice. Archaeological excavations have found mass graves at the base of city walls, people killed by defensive fire from above. The human shield was doctrine. If you survived the siege, your reward was a 1,000-mile death march to be sold in a slave market you couldn't pronounce the name of. Welcome to the fourth act, the greatest forced migration in human history. The Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. It ran on a currency more valuable than silver: human beings. After each conquest, the sorting began. Skilled artisans sent to Karakoram, laborers sent to work camps. Women, especially young women, were the most sought-after commodity in slave markets across Asia. When Genghis Khan invaded the Khwarezmian Empire between 1219 and 1221, the population dropped from roughly 15 million to less than 7 million. Where did those 8 million people go? Many were killed, yes, but millions more were marched to slave markets scattered across the empire. Women from Uzbekistan ended up in Mongolia. Women from Baghdad ended up in China. The Mongol Empire created the most efficient slave trade system since Rome. In Samarkand, slave markets became permanent institutions with standardized pricing and even warranties. If a slave died within the first month, you could get a refund. These markets existed for generations. By the late 13th century, there were merchant families whose entire business across multiple generations was buying and selling human beings. A woman from Nishapur could end up sold in China 4,000 miles away. Her children would never know her homeland. Her grandchildren wouldn't even know what language she had spoken. Entire ethnic groups were scattered so thoroughly they ceased to exist as identifiable peoples. This is why Central Asian genetics show such incredible mixture today. It's the signature of the largest forced relocation in Historia, continental-scale reshuffling of humanity. We've covered 4 acts: biological replacement, public humiliation, human shields, continental-scale trafficking. But there's a 5th act, and it might be the most disturbing because it's the one that worked most completely. The 5th act is the erasure of memory itself. When the Mongols burned cities, they specifically targeted the people who held cultural knowledge. Poets were killed, historians were executed, religious scholars eliminated. Anyone who could preserve and pass on cultural memory was considered a threat. In Baghdad, books were thrown into the Tigris River in such quantities that chroniclers said you could walk across the river on floating pages. Why target these people specifically? Because the Mongols understood, you don't just burn the books, you kill the people who could rewrite them from memory. And here's the cruel brilliance. In most pre-modern societies, women were the primary carriers of cultural memory. They taught children their first words. They told the stories. They sang the songs. They maintained family histories. By systematically targeting women through violence, enslavement, and forced assimilation, the Mongols were attacking the transmission mechanism of culture itself. A woman forced to bear a Mongol child, enslaved in a foreign land, forbidden from speaking her native language, cannot pass down her culture. The chain is broken. When this happens to thousands of women across dozens of ethnic groups, the result is cultural extinction, not in one generation, but within 2 or 3. By the time the great-grandchildren are born, there's no one left who remembers the cities, speaks the languages, or knows the songs. Let me give you some names. You probably won't recognize them. That's the point. Meve, possibly the largest city in the world in 1221, population 500,000. Today, ruins in a Turkmenistan desert that most people have never heard of. Nishapur jewel of Persian civilization, where Omar Khayyam once studied. Today, the medieval city is buried under centuries of dirt. Urgench, capital of the Khwarezmian Empire. The Mongols diverted a river to flood it. Today, an empty plain. These were major cities, centers of learning and culture. And they were so thoroughly destroyed that most modern people don't know they existed. That's successful erasure. The Mongol conquest killed an estimated 40 million people, roughly 11% of the world's population at the time. But the death toll isn't the complete story. The complete story is who they killed and how. The systematic targeting of women as a weapon of cultural destruction. The transformation of human beings into tools, commodities, messages. How did 1 million Mongols conquer 50 million people? They built a terror machine so effective that it made resistance futile and submission the only rational choice. They perfected a 5-act system designed to unmake civilizations from the inside out. The proof isn't just in chronicles or ruins. It's in us. 16 million men carry Mongol genetic lineage. Entire languages are extinct. Major cities vanished. And for most victims, there's no one left to remember their names. There's something that haunts me about this story, and it's not the scale of the violence. It's the silence that came after. The absence where languages used to exist. The blank spaces on maps where great cities once stood. The millions of women whose names were never recorded, whose stories were never told, who died twice, once in body and once when their memories were forgotten. History remembers the Mongols for their empire. But perhaps what we should remember them for is something more unsettling. They proved that you can destroy a civilization more completely through systematic cruelty than through simple slaughter. That the most effective weapon isn't the sword, it's the calculated breaking of human beings in ways that echo through generations. The women who suffered these atrocities left behind no chronicles, no monuments, no graveyards we can visit. But they left something else. They left a genetic signature that reaches forward through 8 centuries, touches 16 million people, and whispers a truth that makes us uncomfortable. That history isn't just written by the victors. Sometimes it's written into us, into our very selves, whether we want to remember it or not. The Mongol Empire fell centuries ago, but the machine they built, the understanding that fear is more powerful than force, that cultural destruction is more complete than physical destruction, that targeting women is the most efficient way to erase a people that knowledge didn't disappear. It just waits in the shadows of history, ready to be rediscovered by anyone willing to see how it worked.